So today we'll be working on a photo taken by Meg Mueller, our managing editor. The photo may be familiar as we ran a similar one on our November-December 2019 cover. I'm going to walk you through my raw process for this, but it is my process, so don't think that it's going to look like anybody else's. First, I usually start with the white balance, and I tend to run my photos pretty warm, so I'll usually bump them as much as I can. You can play around with this. You can try other white balances to get other effects, even if they're not the right white balance for the photo that you're working on. You never know what you might get when you play around. But we're going to end up bringing it back to my nice warm shade. And then next I move on usually to the exposure. And this and the other sliders are something that I adjust on the fly. And I don't just adjust one, move on, adjust the next, move on, and never look back. I'm always going back and fixing things. So please feel free to play when you do this. Also, when I work these sliders, I'm not always sure what I want out of it. So I'll run them to the extremes and then bring them back to where I want it to be. And in this particular processing, I'm looking for something more like a silhouette. So I'm removing a lot of the white and the hot spots. Then I'll move on to clarity. I know some people who will march that clarity up to 100%, but I think it looks fake, so I generally don't do that. Next for me is usually vibrance and saturation, and I have to be a little careful because I tend to be heavy-handed sometimes with these. The next part is something that I think is really important, and I don't know if a lot of people know about it. And what it is a thing called chromatic aberration. If you see in your photos that are very contrasty, sometimes a blue or a purple or a red line along the contrasted edge, that's chromatic aberration. I'm not going to give you the technical definition here. You can look it up. But look at the post over on the right in this particular image. See when I click on the chromatic aberration control, how it removes that? Please, please, please look for this in your images because I see a lot of chromatic aberration in a lot of the submissions that I get. You can do a profile correction to adjust for the curve of your lens and also to remove some of the vignetting. And it's not an all or nothing. You can turn it on and then go down below to where the distortion and vignetting are and make some customized adjustments there if you'd like, if you want more, less. This particular image, I actually like it the way it is. So you can see the differences that it makes as I swing these to the left and the right. But I'm just going to keep this one the same. So then we'll pop down here and click on Open Image. And you see something similar to what we had on our November-December cover. So next what I'm going to do is talk about a different process and a different way of achieving the look that you might want. Say you wanted more of the foreground details in this shot and you didn't want it to be so much of a silhouette. So I'm actually going to process the image twice, and I'm going to go through these kind of fast as opposed to how I did it last time. I'm just flying through this really quickly. So what I'm going to do with this image is I'm processing for the foreground. So I'm processing for the shadowed areas. I want to get as much detail out of them as possible. Again, I'm removing that chromatic aberration. And this time I'm actually going to go ahead and do the profile correction because I like the way that it looks. One thing you'll want to be sure of when you're trying to put two images together is if you do the profile corrections on one, make sure you do the profile corrections on the other, otherwise they're not going to match up. So I have this image that I opened with the lighter, and now I'm going to process it for the sky. So I processed it for the background and had all my details. Now I'm processing solely for what I want the sky to look like. Then I'm going to open that up in Photoshop and I'm going to dump it into another layer, and then we'll work on layer masks. So here we are in Photoshop. I'm copying over my dark layer, which is processed for the sky, and I'm pasting it into a new layer above my first image. I'm going to add a layer mask to it. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select the sky on the lighter image. I'm just using the magic wand here and I'm just using it fast and furious and not being careful. If I were doing this for real, I might pop over into the trees and try and get rid of some of that white. Any of you who have ever tried to do this know that it's almost impossible to get every single patch of that sky selected in order to mask it out of the layer above. But this is all part of what I want to show you because this is what I see a lot of with images that are sent to me here at the magazine. So I'm cleaning up my selection there. Now I'm going to go back to my darker layer and I will select the inverse because what I want to do is mask out all the rest of it and keep the sky. And now I'm going to hide these dotted lines so you can see what it looks like. See how crappy it looks on the right? It's obviously poorly selected and you can see all the original sky showing through. So I get images like this. It's just not good. It's never going to make it into the magazine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to keep the old one there, just hide it so that we can refer to it later. I'm going to delete all of the mask information and I'm going to start over and try again. So here I go back to my original mask. I select it. I will select the opposite again. And then I'm going to do something that I see a ton of people do. And I don't know if they do it this way, but they're doing things like this. So you're going to change the selection and I'm going to expand it so that it's not so tight to the trees. Now I'm exaggerating this process and then I give it a little bit of a feather and then I'm going to do a layer mask. So again, I'm exaggerating this, but I see this on a ton of photos. Let me hide these dotted lines again. And you see what I'm talking about? I get these ghosted images all the time where somebody wants a really cool sky, but they don't know how to get it and separate it from the tree. So I'm going to show you again by duplicating that layer, removing the mask and starting over how I would go about doing this. So I would use the gradient tool. And I always do this wrong at least once. It's like a USB. You plug it in once, you have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. Oh, no, that's wrong. So then I go back the other direction. So this is what I'm saying is you got to play around with this kind of stuff. Now this is closer to what I want. I can still see some lighter patches of the sky around the tree. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of custom not dodging and burning, which you might be familiar with, but removing and subtracting on that layer mask. So right now what I want to do is, let's see, I have to even think about it myself. Am I adding to the layer mask or am I removing from the layer mask? What I'm doing is removing from the layer mask because I don't want to mask out this sky layer. I'm removing some of that mask so it's showing more of the sky layer up around the tree. Do you see where I'm pointing at? So I'm using a very soft brush, 20% opacity, just to kind of blend it a little bit more. So I want to click on this and show you. That's what we were dealing with before. That's what we did the first time. This is what we did the second time. And now here's where we're at. Looking pretty good on the tree, right? I mean, you could mess around with it a little bit longer, but it looks pretty good. So then we want to get some of that foreground in there. So I'm going to go ahead and again, copy this layer mask. And I always keep my old layer masks in case I need to go back. Now, when I drag this layer mask to the trash, it gives me a chance to apply it. And then I'm going to create a new layer mask on there. But see, this is what it looks like. This is what the mask looks like without anything behind it. So I'm putting this next layer mask on there and I'm going to do my same gradient trick down at the bottom. How cool is that? I mean, you don't even have to make any selections, anything. And again, you can go back and do your fine tuning now. You can add to that layer mask, select or delete from the layer mask, do whatever you want to make it look good. But the thing that you need to remember is you're looking at this photo and you took it, but nobody else has seen this photo before you show them. You are in control of the art behind this photo. So you make it do whatever you want it to do. Who the heck? Okay, so this last part I'm going to show you is bringing out the person. So we want to see Eric a little bit clearer here. We don't want him silhouetted. You could just go in with a big brush and try to brush over it, but look what's happening on that layer mask. You're also getting some of that bleed through. So what I would do is I would go back again to my original image where it's nice and separated between light and dark. And I would go ahead and select around Eric. Make sure you get all the little nooks and crannies. Again, I'm going really fast here, so it's not going to be as perfect as it would be if I was doing this for real. I just want to give you an idea of the things you can do. So I select a large portion around Eric so I can be sloppy if I want to. And then I'm going to go ahead again and select the inverse because I want to select Eric. I'm going to go back to my layer mask and I'm going to paint inside of Eric to reveal more of him in the photo. Cool, right? Okay, so one more time. Here was our first try, not very good. And here was our second try with the ghosting that I just can't stand. Here was our third step with the tree brought forward, and then our last step with everything. And now looking back at our original, here's more of our silhouetted image versus the image that has the foreground brought out. So it all depends on what you want, but those are a couple of different ways to achieve it.